Hello and welcome to my channel. Here I review new movies and television shows and talk about them. Today, I want to talk about Hulu's new Boston Strangler. It's based on a famous case from Boston, Massachusetts that revolved around the murder of 13 different women that were attributed to a serial killer dubbed the Boston Strangler. The film was written and directed by Matt Rusking and follows Loretta McLaughlin, played by Keira Knightley, while she takes up the investigation as a reporter at the Record American. We watch as she and fellow investigative journalist Jean Cole, played by Carrie Coon, run around asking questions of the police, different experts, witnesses to the crimes, and family members of the victims. They argue with the editors and really push for their story to make the news. We also get a peek into Loretta's home life, her marriage, and the struggles she went through as an investigative reporter in the 1960s. The film includes a lot of true details from the case as well as a few conspiracy theories floated by unrelated people after the fact. The film blends Loretta's personal life into the grander story about the Boston Strangler, and we watch as the case consumes her life and her relationships and drives her into an obsessive state. The overall story is convoluted and boring and doesn't really inform you about the case any more than a quick read of the Wikipedia article for the Boston Strangler will, and it spends a lot of time glorifying Loretta's involvement. It includes more characters than I could remember. Does a poor job of making each character feel unique while fleshing them out, and as much as I hate to say this, probably included too many details of the case for the story it was trying to present. At a certain point, I was just overloaded trying to remember all the different victims and suspects, and telling them apart was impossible because we only ever see them in small flashes, and the different groupings of victims all had similar appearances. On top of that, Loretta and Jean were constantly changing direction, and it wasn't always explained why. It also becomes impossible to care about Loretta's home life at a certain point because it just isn't all that relevant to the main storyline, and it makes Loretta unsympathetic. It makes her look like an obsessive asshole. She's constantly ragging on her husband, who both fully supports her career and picks up her slack in taking care of their kids and house. And her career at the paper does end up directly affecting their personal lives. These scenes just end up feeling like wasted time. And there is a lot of wasted time. Scenes of the two running around, of Jean and Loretta reading papers that we can't make out the words on, and watching montages of them calling different people and getting hung up on. There are a lot of investigation-style scenes that are repetitive and boring. The overall narrative that the film presents is consistent with reality, but the film seems to ignore one of the most important factors in what went wrong in the Boston Strangler case. It presents the reporters as the hero of the story and doesn't acknowledge that they sensationalized it and printed intimate details of the murders and conspiracy theories of a serial killer made by seemingly credible experts. They had a serious hand in shaping the narrative and in how the confession by Albert DeSalvo came to be. But the film conveniently ignores that and blames the police and other higher-ups in the organization for everything. It came off as entirely tone-deaf and ignorant. The cast sees about 8 billion actors come and go for small parts, and a significant chunk of the screen time goes to Keira Knightley as Loretta. There are a lot of serious faces, some moving scenes of Knightley talking with the victims' families, and a lot of boring scenes of Knightley and Coon flipping through papers and looking intently at them. Knightley is probably the least impressive part of the cast, playing a mostly emotionless character that half tears up at most and gets kind of pissy anytime things don't go 100% her way. The character is unlikable, and Knightley doesn't seem to have much presence beyond being the focal point of the camera for most of the film. She technically gets the right emotions at any given point, but they seem like shallow recreations rather than the real thing. Around her, the rest of the cast is giving decent performances that follow the emotions of the story, and they're all fairly believable. None of them gets more than a minute or two, and there are a lot of similar looking people in the film, especially amongst the cops. There are good actors in the cast, but the film won't give any of them a chance to really stand out. No big speeches, no big emotions, just a lot of exposition. Visually, the film has a dreary, old-fashioned look to it. Everyone's dressed in gray, brown, or black, the walls of the buildings are the same with the odd white mixed in, and everyone is wearing their Sunday best. Suits, pantsuits, and dresses. The sets look the same, characters all look the same, and the visual journey is just confusing in general. It jumps around with a lot of different time skips but doesn't always make the jump readily apparent, and we cut back and forth between a number of different perspectives, but the film isn't good at the transition or giving you context for the new point of view. There are lots of repetitive montage scenes of Loretta and Jean reading and doing investigative work that become overbearing after a certain point, and the only scenes that stood out were of Loretta speaking to people involved with the case and them giving an emotional performance. In those scenes, the drama interview-style camera work allows the actors to go all out in their performance and have it captured in detail. Sound-wise, the film uses a lot of relevant background music for the scenery and a few original songs that are more appropriate for the time period the film is set in, but the overall effect of the soundtrack is minimal. They know when to play tension tracks, emotional music, or even the odd sound effect, but it never adds any depth or emotion to the scene that isn't already there. I rarely found myself noticing the music at all, and at a certain point I had to go back to re-listen to make sure I hadn't missed anything. They either needed more impactful music or they needed to make it louder and more prominent in the scenery. Overall, I found the film to be a somewhat boring look into the Boston Strangler case. They're not taking any risks or coming up with any new information. It does present all of the case's details, but does it in a way that is confusing and hard to follow. Of the cast, only Keira Knightley gets enough screen time to really flesh out her character, and she wastes most of her time looking stern and playing 20 questions. The rest of the cast is basically doing exposition work, while the visuals are dreary and bland and the music is insignificant. If you want to know about this case, go read the Wikipedia page. I'm pretty sure that's what the writers did to come up with the script. 4 out of 10. Remember guys, those are just my thoughts on the film, so go ahead and let me know what you think down in the comment section below.
Arr! See you later there, matey.